The views and opinions expressed on the Hard Time Podcast are of the hosts and guests individually. The Hard Time Podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not affiliated with any entity, agency, or department. Human beings have thoughts and feelings that do not necessarily affect the professional performance of their duties.
Welcome to another episode of Hard Time. I'm your host, Jake Motherfucker Welder. I am a sergeant at a jail somewhere in the American Southwest, currently in the state of Delusion. We are making it work, though. Our staffing levels are a little low. It's just a struggle to get people to show up to work. The people that we have seem to think that they're not needed and they can just come and go as they please. We're not as short on one shift as we are on the other, and they just seem to think like they can just take time off whenever and it doesn't affect us. Just making things a little difficult on us. We're stretched a little thin on one shift, and the other shift, it just seems like it's the same people just having to work the same shifts same posts because the posts that people want to work keep going to the people that are working overtime constantly. So that's kind of where we're at with things. We're not terribly understaffed. We just like 3 or 4 positions down, just a handful. But it's enough, it's like a small percentage, but it's just enough that it's starting to feel it. So, I mean, like last week, I took a day off, but I made sure it was a day on the schedule. There was nothing really going on except one meeting I told them I would make, and they told me not to worry about it. So, which, was kind of had like one annual thing that's kind of like a hoorah, trying to get everybody stoked for stuff. But I was just happy that they do a annual thing where they allow you to sell some of your time back. If you have surplus hours of paid time off, you can sell a certain amount of it back to them and get like basically an extra paycheck. So I like to do that a couple times a year. I still have plenty of paid time off that I can use, but I earn it faster than I can use it. And, on a normal week, I'm there 25% of the week. I work, 3.5 on, 3.5 off, and I'm there for 12 hours of the day. So it's like I feel like I get 12 hours off after working a 12-hour shift, and I get as many days off as days that I work. So I don't feel like I need to take a lot of time. So taking a day or two here is nice. Might be able to take a little bit of time off here in the near future. So that'll be good. Get to maybe go work on the ranch a little bit. My kids have time off from school, so that's what the plan is. Here in a couple days when I get on days off, is spend a couple days working on the ranch, doing some stuff that is not corrections for a few days, like wake up when I feel like waking up and go to bed when I feel like going to bed, and working with my hands, doing some stuff out in nature, getting dirty and getting into diesel fuel and spend some time out in the woods. So we will get to do a little bit of that with the kids, which is always nice. It's always fun. I was actually working on my motorcycle that I did not consult John about buying or riding, but it's getting it ready for the season, and it still needs a little bit more work, but I was doing some work on it, and my youngest, like just grabbing tools, and she's little girl. She's just like, I help you, Daddy. She's just ready to jump right in. So she's a little tomboy. She's interested in mechanical things, interested in my tools. So she loves doing that. My son, he loves getting out in the woods and stuff and helping with dragging trees around and doing that kind of stuff. So it'll be good to take the kids off grid here for a couple days. So that's what I've got going on. That's the updates there. And as the title implies, I was going to get into the state of New York, and I'm an expatriate New Yorker, so I can speak with some authority on the subject. When I say that, talk about the state of delusion, the Empire State. When I say empire, I mean like the Empire from Star Wars. The state of New York is much like a lot of other states where you have, large city politics of, liberal stupidity that goes on, that they vote for the entire state, and you have a lot of really good salt of the earth, normal people that make up the majority of the state. That's where I was from, not from New York City or anywhere nearby. And the New York City makes up such a large population-wise of the state that it's really difficult for anybody else in the state to make any kind of impact politically. So they vote for the entire state, like we all want to, cut genitalia off our children and hire people that chant death to America. So so now we covered on this show that there was strikes that were going on. We can get into and cover where those things are at now, how they feel about that, what's going on a little bit at Rikers Island in New York State, the HALT Act, and then maybe we'll get into Rikers Island and some of the acts, maybe some individual stories in New York as time permits. So we can just talk about the general state of New York and corrections. So this is the Press Republican, Plattsburgh, New York. This is was authored by Alex Violo. New York prison staffing remains 20% below pre-strike levels, Senator says. So chemical exposures, forced overtime, and debate over the HALT Act remain key concerns a year after the Wildcat prison strike that led to the firing of 2,000 corrections officers. So we're just past the year mark of that strike that we covered here on the show. Malone, New York. On February 17, 2025, corrections officers across New York started a 22-day strike that led to the firing of more than 2,000 striking officers and the deployment of the National Guard to state prisons. With 3 state prisons near one another and Bear Hill and Broad Roads, Malone was at the center of the strike, and for over 3 weeks, current and former corrections officers and their supporters gathered last year to call for improved safety conditions within state facilities and the repeal of the Humane Alternative to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, or the HALT Act. 1 year later, concerns remain about staffing levels and officer safety at the state's correctional facilities. Daniel C. Steck, Republican, Queensbury, a state senator, said staffing levels are approximately 20% below what they were before last year's strike. So staffing levels have gotten worse. I think in December of 24, the number of COs was 14,000 and change, and December of last year was 11,000 and change. We're down about 3,000 just from the end of 24 to the end of 25. Steck told the Telegram this week. According to Steck, he believes the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision is making an effort to recruit more staff. But how can you recruit more staff when you don't support them? When you don't, when you send a message that you're going to fire them and you're not going to listen to them. Like, what's the point of go to work for a place that, doesn't have your back? I know it's true they've made an effort to recruit more. It's not like they're going to recruit more. They aren't trying to recruit more, Steck said. Between the legislation in the change requirements and financial incentives, they are trying to recruit more COs. Steck said of the 2,000 officers fired after the strike, some were rehired. I do know some of them did come back to work. I know a lot of them were offered and decided to not go back for whatever reason. Betrayal. The bottom line is that despite of the recruitment efforts and a larger academy class, at the end of the day, we're still down 3,000 from where we were just a month before the strike. Steck says he does not believe careers in the department are as sought after as they once were when multiple family members would work as corrections officers. Well, it used to be a decent job, but, you felt like, it was, you had a steady job as a government employee. When you send the message that if you're a government employee and your job is in jeopardy, that you could get fired en masse. Yeah, that's not appealing to people anymore. And then you have all these big public trials where people are getting sent to prison for huge prison terms and stuff on top of it. Who the fuck is going to want that job? I don't think those kitchen table conversations are happening with nieces and nephews, sons and daughters anymore, he said. The negative news, negative spotlight on the state that make the job miserable and less safe, I think, are keeping people away. Yeah, no shit. Assemblyman Michael S. Cashman Plattsburgh said there continues to be great concern about the health and safety of corrections officers, civilian staff, and incarcerated individuals at state and corrections facilities. Yeah, we'll get into that. Some of the stuff that's happening to corrections officers, and you seem to not want to do a fucking thing about it. So until you start to do something about that and support the corrections officers, you're not going to get any more fucking corrections officers. Every state employee, be it a corrections officer, New York State DOT, or teachers, they should have a safe environment. We understand it's not going to be a completely safe environment, but when things go sideways, we need support, and we need you to follow through on the correction part of it, like the justice part of it. Like, that's where people need charges. That's when people need solitary confinement. That's where there needs to be consequences for people's actions. He continues, and should be treated with dignity and respect. That is the crux of this, and COs are still not receiving that. Yeah, we don't expect to get dignity and respect from our clientele, but you could get it a little bit from the state, from your employer, from the people above you. Yeah, that would be nice. Like a little basic dignity would be decent. According to Steck, in talking with officers who both went on strike and those who remained within the facilities during the strike, the primary cause of last year's strike was safety. It's always been about safety. Part of that safety specifically was staffing, quality of life, and time off. He said there was mandatory overtime that was happening routinely everywhere in the state. While that doesn't seem to happen as much anymore, they still can't take time off. They can't take vacation. They can't schedule time off because there's even less people to work than there was before, because their fucking solution from the government, no shit, I know you won't believe this, made things worse. According to Cashman, he continues to push for safety reform on behalf of state employees, including corrections officers. That includes making sure we are doing scans of packages going into facilities. Good idea. There have been numerous chemical exposures that need to be dealt with appropriately, and then that will eliminate mass casualty events and people getting ill and not able to work. So that's good. The issues remain, yet billions of dollars are being spent on the National Guard being in there. It doesn't help with morale, and it certainly doesn't help with recruitment. I've heard some stories though about some of the ones from the National Guard, like being in there, and that when they're working cell blocks and stuff, they're not putting up with a lot of shit. They're like, hey, like you need to do what you need to do, and they're like, hey, we need this or we need that, or we have this right or we have that right. Like, no, the fuck you don't. Shut up and go do what you need to do. And say, well, we have rights. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, just shut up. Like, they're not playing games. They're not feeding into stuff. Are they violating rights? Are they following procedure to a T? Probably not. But are they being effective in maintaining safety and security overall? Probably. They're probably being a little more, erring more on the side of safety and security, at least from the stories that I heard. I'm just saying. Steck said when chemical exposures are reported at state prisons and rural communities, it taxes local rescue squads and area hospitals. Yeah, because, you could have, a large number of people getting exposed. And then that's a good portion of your shift of mass exposure that can seriously cause an issue. They don't know what causes it. Some chemical, they tried to suggest it's psychosomatic or stress-induced, he said, adding he disagrees it's psychosomatic or stress issue. There's chemicals in there that they've got to get out. Psychosomatic, like they're making shit up. Fuck you. Cashman said 1 year after the strike, staffing issues persist at correctional facilities. Yes, that's why the governor continues to hold in her executive proposal for money to retain the National Guard there. There needs to be broader range reform that supports these men and women. People often talk that there was a wide strike or wildcat strike, but let me be very clear, the core of the issue was health and safety. According to Steck, the state spent around $700 million last year on the National Guard in state prisons. $700 million. And they're going to be doing that annually. That's crazy. They're not doing the job of COs. They are body, eyes, and ears. They're there for safety. They're deterrent. But they're not taking groups to programming. They're not in the watchtowers. They aren't doing those jobs. He said there's 2,800 National Guard people in these facilities. Steck said in next year's budget, there's a proposal to allocate around $535 million on National Guard and state correctional facilities. They're down on staff, and that's a problem because it's a safety issue. They can't hire the COs they need. According to James Miller, Director of Public Relations in New York State Corrections Officers and Police and Benevolent Association, staffing issues at state prisons create challenges for officers. Safety of staff, providing work-life balance for our members is still a priority, and will continue to be until staffing levels are increased and there isn't a need for supplemental staff with National Guardsmen, according to Miller. Prior to the strike, staffing levels had decreased by 2,000 officers, while inmate population had increased by over 2,000 inmates since January of 2023, according to Miller, who said since the strike, there has risen over 4,000 to over 4,000 officers, which has contributed to unsafe working conditions and lack of any semblance of family life. So, yeah, they're working on attracting new recruits to increase staffing levels. It is conceivable it could take years to accomplish that because you continue to have officers to retire each year. Yeah, you'll have that. Miller said current staffing levels at state prisons are contributing to mandatory overtime for corrections officers. They're still stuck working mandatory overtime as a result of current staffing levels, and it largely prevents them from having any work-life balance. According to Miller, the recommendations from the HALT committee formed after the end of last year's strike have yet to lead to substantial changes to HALT. So that was one of the things they said that they needed to review and then make changes to the HALT Act. The HALT committee, which was formed at the strike, submitted recommendations to the governor last year and have yet to see any positive changes made to the HALT Act. Steck said one of the issues seized with HALT is the amount of programming for incarcerated individuals that legislation mandates. HALT mandates a lot of programming, and that's very labor intensive. If these guys are to be moved around every couple of hours and not isolated in their cell, that takes staff. If you don't have people to do that, then the programming they want to see isn't happening. Mayor Andrea Dumas, the village of Malone, says she believes the situation at state prisons remains largely unchanged since last year's strike. There's not been one thing I can relate to the community that has changed, Dumas said. I hear day in and day out, it's the same. We're continuing to hear rescue calls to facilities for members being brought into the hospital. Dumas says she hears from corrections officers and civilian staff at the state prisons that nothing has changed. They have the scanners there, but safety issues aren't changing. Now, with them closing a prison, adding more incarcerated individuals to other prisons, they're just moving the problems from one area to the other with no change. We are concerned for them. So they're just shuffling shit around. It's interesting. Corrections officers respond. As usual, the great state of New York, in quotes, has gone back on its word. They promised to do massive recruiting, and their recruiting effort has fallen flat on its face. The mandatory overtime is, in fact, illegal, as it wasn't the state's fault that the overtime became necessary. The HALT Act is a law, in quotes, based on the lie that there was a thing called solitary confinement. There was no such thing from the time I was in corrections in New York State until this monstrosity was passed. An inmate got, prior to this law, 22 hours in his cell where he could read books, listen to radio, etc. His recreation time was with other inmates. Left a socialist basis law on a lie. That's true. We've chronicled how they spend quite a bit of time outside their cells, even when they're on the so-called solitary confinement. So, what does the New York Corrections Commissioner, how does he feel about this? He or she, I didn't look. Oh, it's a man. Okay. Don't want to assume now. Don't want to assume someone's gender, misgender someone in 2026. Oh my God. New York Corrections Commissioner stands by firing 2,000 COs after 2025 strike because it's such a brilliant fucking idea. New York budget hearing testimony highlighted accelerating attrition, stalled HALT reform proposals, and efforts to rebuild staffing levels by Robert Harding, the Citizen, Auburn, New York. So highlighted accelerating attrition, stalled HALT reform, and efforts to rebuild. Okay. When the State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision fired 2,000 corrections officers to end the 3-week-long strike in 2025, it exacerbated a staffing crisis. I agree. At a state budget hearing on Thursday, Senator Tom O'Mara asked DOCCS Commissioner Daniel Martusello III if he regrets firing the corrections officers, especially as the state is spending more than $1 billion to deploy the National Guard to state prisons, and the agency has 4,600 vacant corrections officer positions. Martusello didn't hesitate. No, he responded. O'Mara, Republican Big Flats, followed up and questioned Martusello's stance. Haven't they been punished enough, he asked. During the strike, Martusello and corrections officers had opportunities to return to work. There were 4 different agreements, he noted. that included concessions from the state in exchange for the officers ending the work stoppage. Although some officers returned to their posts, others continued what the DOCCS called an illegal job action. Because the state terminated employees under the collective bargaining agreement, the fired officers could file grievance. According to Martuscello, more than 900 officers were rehired. We have given them an opportunity to come back, Martuscello said. That has now ended. Arr. Thousands of corrections officers went on strike in New York correctional facilities due to concerns about prison violence and working conditions. Before the walkout, DOCCS reported a record number of assaults on staff and assaults on incarcerated individuals in 2024. So it was dangerous for fucking everybody. Striking corrections officers demanded the repeal of the Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement Act, a law that limits the use of segregated confinement in county jails and state prisons. Officers believe the HALT Act contributed to increasing violence in prisons. It was dangerous for the inmates too, because if you didn't have administrative punishment for inmates, then it was open season on other inmates and officers. It was open season on fucking everyone. Everyone was a target. If the DOCCS commissioner there walked into a prison, he would have been a target because there was no consequences for anybody's fucking actions. Although repealing HALT was unlikely, ultimately it was a legislative decision. DOCCS and the New York State Corrections Officers and Police Benevolent Association, which represents state corrections officers, agreed to form a committee that would examine ways to improve the law. Proposed reforms that were released in September, however, However, there's been no action by the state legislature to implement those changes. So, but I mean, leading up to this, there was the HALT Act had been slow rolled, pun intended. It had been, they had delayed for as long as possible implementing it, and you could amend the language and stuff in it to make it more feasible. You have state statutes and stuff, and they want to change the statutes for what is possible and what isn't possible under this law. But if it's not feasible to be done, you can make changes to it. They make changes to the laws all the time. They act like it's impossible. It's not impossible. It's done annually. If she doesn't, there was no action by the state legislature to implement the changes. So they said they were going to make changes. They didn't do a fucking thing. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who said he questioned Martuscello during the budget hearing, urged Hochul to include HALT reform legislation in her 26-27 budget. How do I add this? Sorry. There you go, Hochul. If she doesn't give one iota about the safety and care of our corrections officers, Palmisano, Republican of Corning, said. Staffing was among one of the top issues addressed during the hearing, with Martuscello highlighting DOCCS's efforts to boost recruitment in the aftermath of the strike. The corrections officers' shortfall is significant. Beginning in 2021, the state lost 1,000 corrections officers a year. This trend worsened in 2025 due to the strike, with a loss of 2,817 officers. So almost 3 times as many that year. Fucking awesome. The number of corrections officers employed by DOCCS fell from 19,295 in 2018 to 11,278 at the end of 2025. So almost half as many officers in 7 years. Almost 50% reduction. Like a 40-something percent reduction. 7 years. To counter the decline, DOCCS invested in its recruitment process, contacted an advertising firm, and took other actions. They called the guy that helped out Bud Light with the training campaign. Is that what they did? Such as increasing officer salaries. Yeah, that's a good idea. According to Marticello, 60,000 people completed forms expressing interest in becoming a corrections officer, and 20,000 were placed on an eligible list. Because I could tell you, after being part of the hiring process, there is a large number of people that will apply for a corrections job that will not pass the background or do not fit the personality profile or won't work the required hours or for a host of reasons would not make a good corrections officer. So that checks out. Let's see. So yeah, only a third were placed on the eligible list. Despite losing 2,800 corrections officers in 2025, the state added 550 new officers. The next academy class has 130 recruits. You need almost 3,000 people, and you have 130 recruits. We had to get the attrition rate under control, and we had to attract people in, so that was going to take some time. Martusello said, "We never thought it was going to be overnight, but everything was trending in the right direction." The right fucking direction. Sounds like a fucking death rattle to me. Jesus Christ. New York DOC, like, what the fuck is he doing? What is his next job going to be? Because it's not going to be head of DOCCS much longer. Fuck. Oh, Christ. Well, let's talk about another fucking pill here. This is from Corrections One, favorite aggregate source. Corrections One's readers respond: former Rikers inmate named New York City Corrections Commissioner. So we're gonna let this is all right, I gotta get his name right. This is Rohan Mamdani. Thought it was a good idea to name a former Rikers Island inmate the New York City Corrections Commissioner. That's fucking genius. Some officers call the appointment a blow to morale, you think? While others say firsthand experience could drive meaningful change. Could drive something. When New York City Mayor Zoran, not the Zohan, that's an Adam Sandler character. Don't get the two confused. Appointed Stanley Richards, a former Rikers Island inmate, to serve as a commissioner to New York City Department of Correction. He called the move not merely symbolic, but a testament to the leadership Richards would bring both staff and incarcerated individuals. For many Corrections One readers, the historic nature of the appointment sparked immediate and deeply divided reactions. You don't say. Richards, who served for 4 years in prison in the late 1980s for robbery and later became executive vice president of the Fortune Society, is now first formerly incarcerated person to oversee the city jail system. During a press conference on January 31st, the mayor said the goal is to prioritize safety, transparency, and rehabilitation. We asked readers, does having served time in jail give Corrections Commissioner valuable insight or create blind spots when it comes to officer safety operations? Why or why not? Here's what you have to say. A slap in the face to officers. Many readers expressed concern that Richard's incarceration history would undermine officer morale and institutional authority. This is a slap in the face to anyone working in corrections in New York City, one reader wrote. I shudder at the thought of hug-a-thug movement this will bring. Another questioned how officers and inmates would respond to leadership from someone who once served time. I don't judge or criticize anyone, especially being an ex-inmate, but to hire a convicted felon to run the jails gives a whole new meaning to the word crazy. The COs/inmates definitely do not want to take orders from this individual, which is going to create a whole lot of extra tension. So what are we solving here? And that is coming from an inmate or an ex-inmate. Others raised concern about the implicit bias and officer safety. Bad idea. Any incarcerated individual now in position of authority will have an implicit bias towards other perpetrators. He does not care about the violence within or the officer. Several readers questioned whether lived experience behind bars would create solidarity with incarcerated individuals that might conflict with operational realities. He is biased and probably feels some sort of solidarity with the inmates, one reader wrote. He could help with reentry as a consultant, but he shouldn't run the department. Another added, no ex-inmate should serve in corrections. Correction officers carry guns, and the commissioner is an ex-felon, and he cannot carry a gun legally. So should he be giving orders to people who can carry a gun legally? It's an interesting thought. Who knows the system better? Other readers saw Richard's background as an asset rather than a liability. So devil's advocate here. Valuable insight. Who knows the system better than him, one reader wrote. When you have paid dearly for a mistake you made, you often are grateful to have the chance to redeem. Another pointed out firsthand knowledge of conditions inside facilities. As an ex-felon, he has firsthand knowledge of the heinous treatment of inmates. Both guilty and innocent have suffered at the hands of other inmates and even those entrusted to protect them. I'm sure Stanley can attest to this reality and hopefully bring much needed change to these facilities. One reader framed the appointment as an opportunity to restore balance. It brings back the humanity to the agency that is needed to help rehabilitate troubled people, giving them a chance to become a healthy, functioning part of the community. Okay, so that's only 2-4. Concerns about experience and operations. Beyond questions of bias, some readers focused on operational complexity. Absolutely not, one commenter wrote. An individual who does not know the policy, procedures, regulations, state and federal laws, jail rules and regs, union rights, overtime, staffing issues, training, HR rules, federal law, working rights, and on and on and on. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. We know he was a felon in 1980. I mean, we don't know what he's done since then. So that's not necessarily true. Others questions whether the symbolic appointments overshadow practical leadership experience. That may or may not be true. You know, is he just there as a figurehead? Is it a political stunt, or is he going to actually, you know, do something, do something positive? This is a publicity move. One reader said he may be a very capable person, but I see this time inside. Think that his time inside will probably make him biased. Probably. Another reader compared Richard's appointment to naming a former federal inmate as a deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, saying they would prefer formerly incarcerated individuals serve as consultants rather than lead an entire department. Uh, maybe keep a really close eye on payroll while he's serving. I don't know. Maybe. Broader reflections on the future of corrections. And I will say, just because somebody did something, I mean, 1980 was what, fucking 36 years ago? Like, if he made a mistake 36 years ago and he's straightened up and flew right since then, um, maybe you should give the guy a chance. But if the only experience that he has, the only qualifier at all that he has for the job is that he was an inmate then, and he has no other experience in the field, nothing else in his 36 years since 1980, um, you know, qualify him for the job, then he's the wrong person for the job. But I don't know anything else about him. So, broader reflections on the future of corrections. Some responses widened and the discussion beyond one individual to the future of the profession itself. One reader argued that correction careers require stronger educational foundations. Corrections is a rewarding career, but needs to be upgraded. A high school education is not enough, nowadays. Corrections officers should be and are actually counselors. No, they're not. You don't need to counsel people. Your job is safety and security. They have counselors for counseling. So that reader can argue whatever they want. Counseling is not your fucking job. Another raised concerns about housing strategies and safety policies, including solitary confinement and classification systems. But I don't know what that has to do with anything. These comments highlight underlying tension, whether reform efforts should prioritize rehabilitation models, operational security, or recalibration of both. I mean, you want to talk about, like, is that what his priorities are going to be? Maybe that would be, but a divided profession. Richard's appointment has clearly struck a nerve within the corrections community. For some, his past represents a hard-earned insight and credibility. For others, it raises concerns about morale, authority, and officer safety. As one reader put it simply, I hope I'm wrong. The debate underscores a broader question facing agencies nationwide. How should lived experience factor into leadership, and where is the line between reform and risk? What do you think? What do you think? What, leave a comment below. What do you guys think? Do you think it's a good idea? Like I said, just on its face, I don't think it's a great idea. But again, don't know much about the individual or what he's been doing since. If he's been working in the field, if he's been doing good work, if he's gained a lot of experience, maybe he is a decent person for the job. But if that's his only experience, that's a fucking terrible idea. Union. HALT Act fuels dangerous conditions after bodily fluid attacks on New York corrections officers. Oh, fucking told you so. February 6, 2026. Multiple Auburn corrections officers were treated at the hospital after inmates threw or sprayed urine and feces smelling liquid in 4 separate incidents. The Citizen, Auburn, New York. So this is yeah, it's icky, it's gross, right? No, it's could be disease transmission. People have hepatitis, people have fucking AIDS. This is a weapon that inmates can use that can, not only affect your career and your livelihood, it could affect your health, it could affect your life. There's a reason that they can get criminally charged for this. And there used to be administrative punishment that was immediate, and then on top of that, they could face charges as well. So while the charges are being filed, you go straight to the hole. Do not collect $200. Do not pass go. You throw shit and piss on people, you go straight to the hole. Kicking and screaming gets you way United Airlines way. We don't care. Now we're going to drag you kicking and screaming. You're going to the fucking hole. That's it. We don't care if you're naked. We don't care if you're covered in your own piss, shit, and blood. you're going. You want to fight us the whole way? Fine. We need to knock you the fuck out. We'll do that. You need to mace you? We'll do that. You want to tase you? Okay. We need to carry you? We will. Like, that's it. Like, fuck, let's fucking go. But now with all this shit, like, well, no, we can't do that. He's got to go to programming and he's got to go do this and that. And he's got to see a counselor 16 times a day and he's got to have this. Oh, fuck that. Anyways, Auburn, New York. Continuing its push against the HALT Act, the State Corrections Officers Union said that bodily fluids were thrown at multiple staff members at Auburn Correctional Facility last week. In a news release Wednesday, New York State Corrections Officers and Police Benevolent Association said the first of 4 throwing incidents took place on January 17th when an inmate threw a urine-smelling liquid through their cell bars at the back of an officer conducting rounds. After refusing to exit their cell, the inmate started a small fire in it and propelled the liquid at a second officer. Both officers were treated for exposure by facility medical staff and then taken to Auburn Community Hospital for treatment. And that wasn't the end of their treatment, because then they most likely had to do a series of fucking shots, blood draws, and continued treatment for weeks to make sure that they didn't contract a fucking disease. So in addition to their normal work, now they have to go to a fucking hospital or go down to the nurse or whatever as part of their shift. Maybe it happens so much that they have the ability to do it there at the facility, which is fucking ridiculous that it's that bad, or they go to a hospital or some kind of, occupational health place, or, dial a doctor, a telehealth type, whatever you call it, one of those quick in emergency room, emergency hire places. The same day an officer was watching the main yard, saw an inmate spray another inmate in the face with liquid from a container, the union said. The inmates then exchanged punches, and after officers responded, the container was picked up again, and its feces and urine-smelling liquid was sprayed at a sergeant and officer. So if we're counting, that was the first one, officer doing rounds. Second one, officer responding. Third one now, officer and sergeant in the yard. So technically, officer and then sergeant again. So that really is like 4 in 2 days. The sergeant and officer were treated at the hospital for significant exposure, and neither has returned to duty, the union said. On January 24th, the union continued. An inmate threw a urine-smelling liquid from a cup at the head and upper body of an officer conducting an inmate count. The officer was treated and remained on duty. So that it happened so often there, they were able to do it there, take care of it. So we're up to 5 people now. The next day, another officer conducting rounds was struck in the face and eyes by urine-smelling liquid, the union said. So 6 now. They were treated at the facility and hospital and did not return to duty. 6 now. The union noted that unrelated to the throwing incidents, liquid-stained paper was believed to be synthetic drugs was seized during a recent routine frisk of an inmate who also spit in the face of an officer. So that's 7. The union concluded its release by saying the HALT Act has created an environment that is detrimental to the safety of both staff and inmates who follow the rules. Until the legislature seriously considers the recommendations of the HALT committee, incidents like these will continue, the union said. These throwing incidents not only jeopardize the health of our members, but further highlight a work environment that fails to prioritize the safety of the men and women who work inside the prisons every single day. And how about the inmates? Don't forget that one inmate issue in the yard happened when they were throwing piss and feces on other inmates. And what can they do about it? Fucking nothing. They can't do anything about it. And and where do you get this stuff from? You know, you get it from these assholes, disingenuous fucking assholes like Zoran Mamdani and fucking Kathy Hochul. Like, they don't give a shit about corrections officers. What do they want to do? They want to fucking put forward their, you know, extremist fucking ideology. Their, leftist, communist, extreme Muslim ideology, radical ideology. That's what is important to them, not the safety of corrections officers. They don't give a shit. Even though they're being targeted by fucking terrorists in some cases. Mandami there had fucking bombs thrown outside of his house, outside of his residence there in New York. And people who were, you know, um, naturalized citizens, yes. Parents from the Middle East, from what was it, Afghanistan, and I forget what the other one was from. But they were, using gestures, proclaiming that's used by ISIS terrorists. They're not saying we're number one. They're using the hand gesture for ISIS. But that's what that's what they want to promote. So they'll stand there in their suit and tie at their lectern and stand in front of an American flag and a New York State flag and say that's what they represent, that they represent the state of New York and the people of New York. But really, they represent extreme socialist, extreme Islamist fucking ideology. They don't give a shit. They don't care about corrections officers. And people may think, he's too alt-right or whatever, but I mean, he was seen going to Zoran Mamdani appeared at the Brooklyn Mosque where imams preached hatred against Jews and Christians. Okay, so he went to the Brooklyn Mosque here. Let me see, so I don't mispronounce it. The Islamic Society at Bay Ridge. The Imam Muhammad al-Bar, religious leader known for praising Hamas and calling for divine guidance for their attacks on Israel. And he talks about, these, talks about, Allah and stuff, but he forgets that, some of these teachings and stuff call for everybody who's a non-believer being killed. It's the radical ideology. And that's the kind of shit that, that's why you hire fucking inmates to run prisons. That's why I put it, let me see here. Give me a second. I put it in my phone. Zoran here, he elected to his staff, Ramzi Qasim, who provided legal defense to Al-Qaeda terrorists. He wrote an op-ed, he authored an op-ed in Columbia Spectator justifying Islamic terrorist attacks, including suicide bombings, as one of many reactions to oppression and disoppression, not the cause. Rather than holding terrorists accountable for their atrocities, Qasim called for greater empathy towards them, urging them to grasp how and why a human being was driven to the brink and saw no escape from their plight except through self-detonation. So, yeah, he wants us to be more understanding towards terrorists. And now the feds have taken over Rikers Island. So this New York Daily News, Rikers Island Jail now under federal manager's oversight. The former Vermont DOC commissioner will oversee efforts to reform the troubled jail complex and improve conditions for staff and inmates. This January 27, 2026. Josephine Stratman and Leonard Green, New York. Leadership of the notoriously problem-plagued Rikers Island jail complex has officially fallen into federal hands with the anticipated appointment of an independent administrator, officials said on Tuesday. Nicholas Demi, former commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections from November 21 till 25, will begin oversight of the jail complex, relieving New York City and Mayor Rohan Mamdani of local control. Not necessarily a bad thing. Today's appointment of Nicholas Demi as a remediation manager for the city's jail system is a historic step towards ending the egregious constitutional violations that incarcerated New Yorkers continue to endure each day in New York City jails. Mary Lynn Werlwus, director of the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Legal Aid Society, and Debbie Greenberger, partner at Emory, Cecily Brinkerhoff, Abby Ward, and Mizzle LLP said in a joint statement. It's a mouthful. Jesus Christ. It's a lot of liberals in one statement. One sentence here. This decision reflects the court's recognition that the incremental measures of the past promises have failed to deliver the systemic change necessary to bring basic rights and human dignity. Everybody take a shot every time you hear the word systemic change. Mamdani, who took office on January 1, extended Rikers' emergency status during his first full week in office, allowing the jail complex to be exempt from various local laws, though his order also directed the city to work with Rikers' manager to come up with a plan to get into compliance. The previous administration's refusal to meet their legal obligations on Rikers has left us with troubling conditions that will take time to resolve, Mamdani said earlier this month. In a statement on Tuesday, Mamdani's press secretary, Joe Carvello, said the mayor's office believes that our jail system must do better than the history of dysfunction and disorder that has plagued it for too long, and looks forward to working closely and collaboratively with the new remediation manager to improve conditions on Rikers Island. He has no choice because they fucking took over. Mamdani, who is still assembling his city hall team, has put off appointing a new commissioner for the Department of Correction. In the meantime, Linnell Mangley Little, the handpicked commissioner of the former mayor, Eric Adams, currently continues to lead the department. The new mayor will have to work closely with Demi to improve conditions at the infamous jail complex and to manage an all but impossible deadline of closing the facility by next year. Demi's background includes several positions with the Central Intelligence Agency and work with the U.S. Senate and national security and foreign policy aides. Benny Boscio, the president of the Corrections Officer Benevolent Union, in a statement on X, said of Demi's appointment, corrections officers have faced unprecedented challenges in recent years, and it is our hope that as a former corrections manager, the new remediation manager understands the critical role our workplace plays in maintaining safety and security for everyone in our corrections facilities and the dangers we face every day. I look forward to working with Mr. Demi in ensuring the voices of my members are heard. Well, they're going to close Rikers Island. Then what are we going to do? Well, they said they're going to build a prison. So just like they said, just like they say in the song, they're going to build a prison. So New York, still fucked up. No surprise there. Still behind the 8 ball. Still run by crazy fucking communists. But now Islamists. That's a new one. That's somebody forgot. That's a new one. Well, it's not an episode of Hard Time Without a Jake joke. I figured we'd start with a communist joke. It seemed appropriate. I asked my Chinese friend what it's like to live in China. He said he can't complain. Since we're talking about New York City, I was thinking about naming my son Gotham. So when he cries at night, my wife can whisper to me, Gotham needs you. And finally, we talked about Rikers Island. So what do you call an island populated entirely by cupcakes? Deserted. All right. Hard Time will return next week. Never fear. If you have any ideas for Hard Time, I know Sarah has been sending me a bunch of different ideas for Hard Time, so appreciate that. And if anybody else has any ideas, you can always DM me. But other than that, I'll keep doing research. I found couple interesting stories and stuff, and it's been a while since I've gone on to Corrections 1 and looked for stuff. There was a lot of just New York centric stuff this week, so I figured I would go back, even though I haven't done that in over a decade. Go back to New York, just figuratively, not literally, thank God. So I've not set foot back on the ground of New York for over a decade, so probably won't for some time. But I appreciate your patronage, everybody listening and watching. Hard Time week after week, it does mean a lot. You guys supporting the show, your streams and downloads, your comments, all that stuff helps fund the algorithm. You're supportive. If you're following us on Spotify and donating a little bit, a couple bucks a month towards the cause, that helps defray the cost of me doing this, microphones and computers and the subscription for recording and doing all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate you guys keeping the lights on here at Hard Times, so I can continue to do this and keep the show going. So I just want to say I appreciate you guys. So until next week, I'm going to say good night, Jake.